Hello, beautiful alchemist. Welcome to Reiki Radio. I am your host, Yolanda, and today we have part two, episode two with Nicholas Pearson. So, if you didn't listen or watch already, part one with Nicholas aired on Monday, and we talked all about crystals for psychic self defense, which is the title of his new book. And he shared a lot with us about the idea and the energy around protection. He shared with us how understanding energy and our relationship to it can be very beneficial for empaths. There was so much very helpful conversation that we had on Monday, but we are keeping the conversation going. So today we switch a little bit over into the realm of Reiki. And as many of you know, not only does Nicholas write books about crystals, he also authored a book called Foundations of Yusui Reiki Roho, which is a Shoden Okiden manual. And in today's episode, we do talk more about Reiki in general. We also talk about him being a researcher of Reiki. And also, he has plans to update that particular book itself. So we get into all of that. But we talk a lot about his realization through his work with Reiki, and also how in his work he had to give himself permission to fail. So, just like last time, there are so many wonderful nuggets within these conversations, and I hope that you're really enjoying the series. In fact, I have received feedback that many of you are enjoying these series with these teachers and authors. And remember, if you want to work with them, if you have questions for any of them, email them, reach out to them, follow them on social media. They are all very responsive. So if you want to know more about Nicholas and his work, be sure to visit his website, theluminouspearl.com, and follow him on Instagram at theluminouspearl. He also has a workshop online coming up on March 1st. So if you do want to learn more about crystals for psychic self-defense, be sure to use the link down in the show description to register for the upcoming class. Again, the class takes place on March 1st. So that is all for now, my loves. Let's learn more about Nicholas and his relationship to Reiki, how it helped him a lot with anxiety, and so much more. And I will see you on the other side. Okay, we are back with Nicholas Pearson, author of many books and teacher. I have to say again, I just have to mention it again because it is the new baby. His newest book is Crystals for Psychic Self Defense, an incredible book. The link, of course, to this book is down in the show description. If you missed it on Monday, we talked all about crystals. So go back and check that out. You want to know what's so crazy, Nicholas? I, when preparing to talk to you, I was like, oh, well, I have to pull out his other books too, Foundations of Reiki Rojo and Flower Essences, and I have the other crystal books, all these things. And when I went, because I usually have the books by author, especially like my Reiki teachers, they're all clumped together, right? But that's because that's what their books are about. So I pulled out Foundations of Reiki Rojo and there was no other Nicholas book. And I got nervous, like, oh my God, did I lend it out? Like my books are my babies. What happened? And just now when we took a break, I remembered they're different topics. So I had to go to that section of the bookshelf to find the other babies.
My library is the same way. I have like a stack of my books as a fancy book drop behind me
Yes.
over here. So if I'm in front of that, that's intentional. But like as far as my actual working library,
Yeah.
I don't get preferential treatment. I still alphabetize myself by author's last name and by topic. So I got to go, back and forth to find them all.
Yes. I love that. It's funny because I was like, am I a crazy person that I have all these books by section? I mean, that's the only way I'll find anything. I have to go by section. But I have to say, okay, this book, Foundations of Reiki Rojo, this is also one of the first books. Maybe this was the first, my introduction to you, but also one of the most incredible books I have on Reiki, and I have a ton Before we talk about Reiki at all, are you going to do a master level or what? Shimpenden book, is it coming?
It is coming.
Okay.
So a couple notes on this, and
Okay.
we can like tab and funnel and come back to some of these a little later.
Okay.
But um, my goal all along was to have a follow-up manual, and then life kind of had some unexpected curveballs in really great ways. I've
Yeah.
been super busy, and then I got busy with other things and other things and other things. But there are a couple of things that I'd been waiting for before actually sitting down to do a proper draft of this. One of which is some works in translation, which one of them will be coming soon, edited by Dr. Justin Stein, and it is Tomita Kaiji's 1933 book on Reiki.
Wow.
Um, so that allegedly very, very soon, like maybe within days or weeks of this airing, the pre-order link will be up.
Wow.
So that's something I'm excited about. I just want to have all the current research. There's a gentleman by the name of Olaf Bohm, who's a colleague and friend of Justin's as well, who has this incredible private collection of historic writings and other ephemera related to Reiki from this same time period.
Yeah.
And he's got a work coming out called, I think it's called Journey to Oneness. And that should also be out soon. And there are a couple other Reiki scholars who have relevant research that I just haven't had access to. Dr. Liad Horowitz has from what I am told, from what everyone says, a brilliant paper about the origins of Reiki initiations.
Wow.
And it is not published in a language I read yet. And like Google Translate misses stuff. So I'm eventually going to like conquer that. I have a friend who can help me with some translation work on it, because I want to give proper credit to the proper people. And that's Reiki is an experiential thing,
Yes.
but Reiki history, like all scholarship, requires crossing your T's and dotting your I's. I think before we get a Shinpiden book, before I get it like a Reiki Master Manual, I'm crossing my fingers that I can convince a publisher that this is the smart thing to do. I actually want to do a new edition of Foundations that has been updated with all of the wonderful scholarship that has come out since I submitted the manuscript, because even in the course of writing the book, new documents were translated, and we interrupted the editorial process to accommodate that.
Wow.
But so much more has happened. That book came out in 2018, if memory serves. When I finish some other stuff, it is likely it will be a good time to propose like essentially what might be a 10th anniversary edition.
Wow.
Not because celebrating 10 years is great, but 10 years is enough time to get new data. And
Yeah.
I just want to reframe some stuff, eliminate some things that we know better.
Yeah.
Books are a snapshot in time. And particularly when we try to do anything from a scholarly or academic kind of framework when it comes to historical stuff, we're eventually going to get new data. We're going to have things that maybe only shift the narrative a little to one side or the other, and other times we go, oh, we were wrong.
Yeah.
We were just wrong. So and there's other stuff. I'd love to improve the structure and flow of it. I want to do a little reorganizing of what's in the Shoden and Okuden section to put things that are more effective beside one another instead of spread out in different places. And I just think that'll be some good stuff. But I have actually a lot of Reiki stuff on the horizon,
Yeah.
writing, teaching, and otherwise, in the probably coming 2 or 3 years.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, look at this. This is why it's not surprising that you have new books popping up all over the place. Your mind doesn't stop, which is a beautiful thing. But I'm glad that you bring this up because, again, I love this book for so many reasons, and I've talked about it so much since I met you in 2019. But you bring up a really good, interesting topic to me. It got to a point where I don't want to say I didn't care, but I would glaze over the history. And it was just because there was so much information coming from so many different directions, and there were so many variations of the history, right? And there are some people, you included, that I really value the level of research that goes in and the information that you all continue to look for to update us within the community so that we do have clear understandings of the roots and the foundations of Reiki. But is that exhausting? I mean, because you would have to make an effort to stay updated with what's going on and then not just know what the updates are, but to then research them yourself. Is that exhausting for you?
No, I think it's the opposite. I love it. There are some really monumental books that have come out, particularly in the last couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years if we go that far back. Justin Stein's Alternate Currents, phenomenal.
That's the
Just
green one, right?
yeah,
Green book.
I think it's green. I'm
Yeah.
colorblind, so I'm bad at this, but it has a historic
Yes.
photo of Hawaii Takata on the cover,
Yeah.
at World Treatment Center in Hawaii. But it's by my bedside right now. I'm not reading it cover to cover. Currently, I am pouring through the end notes, finding juicy little bits, and then like backtracking into the text because
Yeah.
the first time I kind of read through most of the book, I didn't get through all the end notes, and there's some really cool stuff in there. Women in Reiki by Amanda Jane and Silke Clayman, just what
Love
an
that book.
incredible book. Oh my gosh, that one is really wonderful. We're just, it's a golden age of Reiki history. And we've got such clearer ideas about some of the forces and ideas and philosophies and praxis that influenced the whole course of the system. And that gives me a lot of hope for the integrity of the practice going forward. Admittedly, I will say that pretty early on in my own Reiki journey, seeing these conflicting pieces of information, narratives that seem to pop up, like about once a month, every month, for 2 or 3 years solid, we got some new fictionalized biography of Usui Sensei,
Right.
and none of them lined up with one another. These like these people providing information or secret teachings in Japan or abroad that nobody could find a picture of or prove they existed. And I think that tells us something about how hungry we are for information. So like I became so guarded, so cautious. And I've really tried to not just look at the evidence, but look at what brings people to interpret the evidence in a given way. And that's
Mhm.
another reason I want to revisit foundations, is because I would like to work through some of my own bias in writing that. I was doing the best I thought I could do at that time,
Right.
but I can do better. We all can. Books are a snapshot in time. We at some point you hit submit and that's it. The book is not actually done. Given an infinite amount of time and energy, and someone else to prepare all of my meals from now
Yes.
in perpetuity, then yeah, I could finesse a book and constantly rework it, and just do everything. It would still never be finished. So we just have to decide when it's good enough.
Right. And see, and that's the part where I said at some point I was just like, I'm gonna glaze over because there was a lot of information coming from all directions. Although it is incredible that people like you and other authors who really are also researchers, not just authors. I think you really have to highlight and underline that you're also a researcher and, fortunate for the rest of us that wouldn't necessarily have the patience or time to do such a thing. And that's why one of the reasons I fell so in love with your book anyway. But I have found throughout the years, and just like you say, what I learned at first, I thought it was absolute truth because that's what was passed on to me. But I learned pretty quickly in this realm in general, it's really hard to put anything in the bucket of absolutes. And not just because of the validity of the information, but how you may personally understand it as you work with not just the historical aspects, but like the practices and these sorts of things. So, how much of that comes into play for you? Like with the practices, is there a lot of drawing from what your personal experiences are.
Yeah, for sure. Reiki is experiential. The
Yeah.
practice of Reiki is an embodied practice, which is a theme that is really tangible in my life right now. And in so many ways, I'm just really exploring this theme of embodiment
Mm.
in Reiki.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how much book learning we do, we aren't Reiki practitioners until we have an embodied experience of Reiki.
Yeah.
We don't really understand what Reiki is, even if we can trace the etymology of the separate kanji and explore how they might have showed up together throughout history. What we speculate Usui exactly meant when he said Reiki Ryoho, Reiki healing
Right.
method, because there's some pretty interesting arguments that could be made that suggest it doesn't mean what we think it means, at least not in a very literal sense. And all of that is well and good, but what is Reiki?
Hmm.
Reiki is an experience. Last week or last episode, we were talking about the idea of oneness,
Yes.
about fundamentally we're all one. I think that is one of the experiences we have in Reiki. It is a an open door towards experiencing non-duality, what we might call Advaita or Advaya in Sanskrit. But it's also more than that because Reiki invites us to be so present and to be so compassionate with our presence that other stuff starts to fall away.
Yeah.
That the hustle and bustle of the world, it obviously doesn't stop. We Most of us can't afford, in more ways than one, to stop participating in that either. But when we experience the depth of what Reiki has, when we embody the precepts, when we perform the hands on healing, when we go through all of these motions, which are in themselves ritual tools, they are
Right.
little mini rituals, and some of them are very elaborate rituals in the system of Reiki. Um, Rituals are special markers in time and space. They help us experience embodiment in ourselves. Historically, in Japan, rituals also suggest the idea of emplacement, just like we
Mm.
embody our spirit, places embody
Yeah.
their phenomenology, their ontology, their like whole depth of symbolism, and orienting the personal, the relative, inside the transpersonal and the absolute is what these ritual elements of Reiki bring to us. So whether it is doing Joshin Kokyu Ho, or performing Chidio, hands-on healing, or using symbols and or mantras, or practicing giving attunements, initiations, reiju, ignitions, whatever your tradition calls that, those ritual elements are so much more than just a means to a specific end. They are that, of course. There's
Hmm.
there's a reason we have initiations in the system of Reiki, but they also give us something that is so hard to put into words. They help us embrace the numinous rather than just the phenomenal world. They help us experience the ineffable.
Yeah. I mean, this is why I know everyone listening is on the edge of their seat, like, wow, I feel like story time with Nicholas. It's incredible. But you bring to mind again what has made me fall in love with the practice. On your website, you can see all of the teachers that you studied with Reiki and also with flower essences and other practices. But I was like, wow, we pretty much did the same thing. And it was that curiosity for me, like, wait, I need to hear someone else's point of view because am I getting the full picture here? And at some point, I did recognize, okay, I'm going to really understand through my practice. But even that, I still wanted to know what other people thought or other points of view. But the thing that has kept me so interested is that realization that even everything in the system keeps pointing to the same thing again and again. Like even when I look at the symbols and I'm like, okay, direct spirit here and rid bad habit and non-dual and then unified, like, oh, it's all pointing to what we might call the great bright light or original nature. But it's just even within the system, it's hitting it from all these different angles. Like, how do you experience that laying of hands? How do you experience that in Enkaku? How do you experience that through the symbols? How are you experiencing that through the Gokai? And it just, every time I think of it, I'm like, the brilliance of the system and not being so blatant about this is what it's pointing to, but I mean, what else is it pointing to? It's incredible to me. So just curious what you think about it.
Yeah, there there are so many threads woven into Reiki practice. There's so many ways we can pursue those threads.
Hmm.
So I'm a big old nerd. I love to study the history, the culture, the language, the exchange of ideas, the evolution of the system.
Yeah.
And that is a way we can also experience some of these things.
Yes.
It is pretty darn incredible to me that in a kind of sort of secret project I'm writing right now, that there are certain elements that people came up with from very different places in the Reiki practice.
Mm.
That there are traditions who thought they were innovating to do new stuff, but were kind of reinventing the wheel unknown to them.
Yeah.
That there are just these unifying forces at play, and it does feel like there's an intelligence to Reiki.
Hmm.
It's so often, especially in kind of the Western Reiki world, and I use that very fluidly because I don't think there's such a strong divide between Eastern and Western Reiki as we once believed. I think ultimately it's the same Reiki,
Yeah.
same energy, and if it's not the same energy, then call it something else. That's
Right.
just my humble opinion. But ultimately, what we are experiencing is that there is an inherent oneness to our practice, an inherent oneness to us, that we're all just human beings with the same fundamental needs and wants and desires and goals and hopes and wishes and dreams and fears.
Yeah.
And Reiki is one way, one of many, that we can explore those and satisfy some of them and make space for us to, just dig that well of compassion a little deeper, maybe, so we can draw more to share with others. That's the beautiful thing about all of these practices. When we experience that great white light, that
Yeah.
numinosity, that um, absolute sense of oneness, you got space to take others on that journey with you. One of my teachers, Hyakuten Sensei, he uses this metaphor of like climbing a mountain in the degrees of Reiki. And the mountain, of course, is a metaphor for enlightenment.
Hmm.
Like getting to the top of the mountain, getting enlightened, is only one half of the journey. Now you got to come back down. Imagine Usui, to the best of our knowledge, is seeking inner peace, Anshin Ritsume, enlightenment, whatever word we want to use for that. So he goes to Mount Kurama. He fasts for 21 days and does his mysterious ascetic practice, the likes of which we'll probably never know very specifically. And he reaches Anshin Ritsume. He could have just stayed there. He could have. We wouldn't be having this conversation right now because
Right.
there'd be no Reiki radio, because there'd be no Reiki.
Right.
So all of these elements, all of these things, they are pointing us to a few key foundational truths. And those truths should motivate us to bring it out into the world. Usui Sensei did that. I mean, when Hawaya Takada sought treatment in Hayashi's clinic, she had such a profound experience. Her immediate instinct was, how do I share this with other people? How do I bring this back to my community? How do I empower others? Like, Reiki is community care. Reiki is this embodiment of those ideals that I wish to see manifest in the world around me.
Yeah.
Uh, this Aquarian age that we're all hoping and wishing for. Like, if 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 half the world could become Reiki practitioners, we'd be there next week.
Right. Yeah. I have to say, for the Aquarian age, I mean, a lot of interestingly, what we see going on now, I'm like, this makes sense for it. Because, well, one, I'm an Aquarius, sun and rising. However, I understand too that, there has to be room made for new ways to come about. And there has to be great lessons that are learned for understanding to come in. So, you know, this might be the entry point to it, and then hopefully we'll get to the like Shangri-La, the humanitarian parts of it all. But I mean, obviously having it at the same time. But this makes me think of this, and I'm so curious to see what you think. When I think about, like the Reiki mind or Buddha mind or whatever this higher level of consciousness we seek to achieve, and thinking about that lens of compassion that Reiki keeps telling us, that's the healer, like that's the great transformer. Have compassion, love anyway. Can you have compassion anyway? Unconditional. Ooh, right? That is a huge undertaking in these times. Huge. And we can meditate all day and do the practices all day, but to really be in relationship to that, like our compassion and how we're able to see things, process things. What I'm trying to ask you is what has your experience with that been? And because a lot of people see almost like what's going on in the world separate from their spiritual practice rather than how do I unify?
Yeah. Gosh, so many thoughts. First and foremost, we are all here. We are all here now.
Yeah.
Um, Unplugging from current events is a luxury a lot of us don't have. And I don't say that as a political statement of any
Mm,
kind, but just like my compassion doesn't stop only with people who look like me,
right.
or sound like me, or live like me, or love like me, or have a body with the abilities that mine does or doesn't.
Right.
My hope for a so-called Aquarian age is an equitable system where we can all find fulfillment. And that means in order for my Reiki practice to be effective, in order for my compassion to be effective, I I choose to pay attention. I am not the most informed human on earth. I'm also not the least informed human on earth. I'm somewhere probably in that middle, as much as I've got the time and space and energy for, like the majority of people.
Right.
And to think that current events, not even just the political variety, but to think that any kind of current event happening out there, anything in the news cycle, is not spiritual, is missing the point. Like having your body is spiritual.
Right.
Participating in your community is spiritual. Showing up not just for your meditation mat or just for your Reiki session at the table or your chanting circle or whatever it's going to be, those are not the only spiritual activities we engage in. And I also want to say, when that feels overwhelming, give yourself permission to fail.
Mm,
You're gonna get stuff wrong. You're gonna get some stuff wrong over and over and over and over and over and over again. And if you're so motivated by compassion for others, what if you just turned like a tenth of that inwards and you said, oh, okay, I haven't figured this out yet. I want to do better. So how can I do that? How can I make space? How can I give myself more grace? How can I seek out resources that are going to help me? And there's a lot of ways, like this could apply to anything. Again, it doesn't just have to be about, the kind of political firestorm happening in many parts of the world. It's not localized.
mhm.
Instability and uncertainty are kind of perennial factors worldwide. But it's really like in our family dynamics, in our social circles, in our work life, how do we exercise the same things? We've got that boss who's just a jerk. We want to have the effective boundary so that way we don't like they're a jerk probably for stuff that has nothing to do with you. So let's try not to take that personally. You're a person. You're gonna give yourself permission to fail, but also try to think about the ways that you can bring compassion into that. And it's gonna be imperfect. So like one of my refrains that I'm working on this year, because I've gone to the well of compassion a lot, and I think I need to dig it quite a lot deeper to have uh, uh, so a thing that I'm trying to train myself is, will such and such result in more kindness in the world?
Mm,
You see someone being wrong on the internet. I used to be really bad about just allowing people to be wrong on the internet, particularly when it's something that is my special interest, my focus. And I'm not talking just a stranger on the internet. I'm talking like in a community that I participate in.
right.
Nobody loves the guy who goes, well, actually. And for most of my life, I was the embodiment of that. I'm like the living archetype of, well, actually. Nobody asked you, Nicholas. So before I'll do that, I go, how is this going to be perceived? Is this going to make someone's day better or worse? And someone can be me. Like, the person saying something wrong on the internet probably doesn't care that they're wrong. I'm going to feel bad about trying to make it right and set the record straight, and then to draw out the whole disagreement and whatever. So is this kind? Is this generating more net kindness than anything? That's a thing I'm currently working on. Um, it's it's a really fine line. I'm going to be real vulnerable here, so feel free to
Yeah.
keep this, take it out, whatever. I have noticed a really big uptake in the number of, I'm just going to say requests because that doesn't editorialize it, that show up in my DMs and my email and all other places. And like, truthfully, I can't humor them all. I'm a team of one person. I don't have a PA. I don't have an individualized publicist or agent or a lot of other things that other folks in this field might have. I'm a team of one.
Yeah.
So people show up, and it's amazing when someone goes, "Hey, I have this problem. Can you fix this for me?" If I can, I will, but I probably can't. And there are days when you get like three or four or seven or eight of these, and it's just like, and it's the silliest things. Like, there was a glitch on a live on Instagram, and someone took that personally, and like, I can't. I'm not responsible for that,
Right.
and and I didn't choose the kindest way out of that.
Yeah.
And then I beat myself up about that, which is also not kind. And then it spirals. So um, with the world being what it is, our practice is not separate to that. Our
Right.
practice isn't just hands-on Reiki. It isn't just our Gassho meditation. It isn't just chanting a mantra or drawing a symbol or seeing clients. Our practice is how we show up for the world. And hopefully we aim to be a little kinder every day. We aim to have better boundaries every day, because saying no thank you or I'm really sorry I can't help you is a kindness.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, the way that you show up and the way that you share and the way that you educate is part of that kindness, really, truly. And it's really funny you say, like, I'm that guy. Well, actually, one of the things that came to mind is like, well, thank goodness you're that guy, because I remember there was a period of time when I saw you do quite a bit of Instagram and Facebook lives, helping the community have more understanding about crystals, what was true, what wasn't, just so much, very, very informative. But also, people that may not know, if they follow you on social media, they'll find you're quite the activist. And I can't remember what it was, but it was recently within the last year. You posted something, and I don't remember what it was, but it was the way you articulated it. It literally brought tears to my eyes. And I think I even sent you a DM and just said thank you for, being who you are. You do show a tremendous amount of care and compassion that is very inspiring. So, in case someone ever told you, I'm so thankful you share the way that you share. Yeah.
You know, my goal is never to isolate certain people from my audience. The same, I don't want to use the word fear, but the same consideration I made in writing the new book. If
Right.
I write to these people and their needs, will it make these people feel excluded? I try to be as mindful as I can, but also as honest as I can.
Right.
Um, like we don't have to sugarcoat it. The world is not a gentle and kind and loving place for everybody all of the time.
Yeah.
And that is the nicest way we can phrase that.
Right.
That is like understatement of the year, right?
Yeah.
Um, but if we accept that as a foundational truth, because the systems in place are designed that way, I would like to believe that for a lot of us showing up in our Reiki practice, we go, huh, isn't Reiki such a great equalizer? There is something that I took from my class with our Java sensei, and I think he may have gotten this from Yamaguchi Chiyoko, co-founder of Jikiden Reiki and a direct student of Hayashi. Um, and it's something to the effect of like after Reiju, we all have the same hands.
Mm.
You've been practicing one day, 10 years, a lifetime. It's the same Reiki. We have the same Reiki hands. Okay, great. That eliminates a lot of contention, a lot of it helps us confront some baggage about people just
Yeah.
at large. And and that is really tremendous. We also learn the importance of like bringing Reiki here before taking it to the world. My activism is almost never showing up at big demonstrations. I can count the number of times I've done that on one hand and have fingers left over.
Yeah.
With my social anxiety, with my workload, I don't prioritize that kind of thing. But there are other things that I can do.
Right.
My activism is ensuring that I put out tools that meet people's needs, that we can show up on those Instagram lives and do a meditation together and maybe unclench our jaws and relax our shoulders and unwind the tension in our spines. And if that's the only thing I can bring to someone, maybe they're going to remember that when they need it later. And that's a little teeny pebble in a pond, but it still has ripples.
Yeah.
And other times it's the energetic and the spiritual side of it. It's like, okay, how do we spread the light? How do we love ourselves and one another in such a way that is such a radical and revolutionary act that we are willing to lean into the discomfort? And that, I'm afraid to say it, that is a political act, even though
Yeah.
it is not aligned with a political party
Right. Right.
necessarily.
Right.
Politics, the root of that word is the same root as the word for people. Politics is of the people. So, like when we show up for human beings, it is a political act. And but also, therefore, you are a person. Show up for yourself. It is the most radical and revolutionary thing you can do, and that is Reiki.
Yeah.
Reiki is radical. Like I just one day that hit me and it was just like, oh, that's that's my role in this. I can do that. I can hold space for others. I can do, online Reiki shares. I can use my platform and it's subtle. Is it this making the same wave as, 100,000 people marching on Washington or some other capital in some other country? No, it's not the same. Definitely different orders of magnitude here, but we're not all called to have the same role in society. And society would
Yeah.
be really boring and ineffective if we all did the same thing at the same time anyway, right? If
Yeah.
everybody on Earth is a banker, nobody is baking bread.
Right.
Nobody is repairing cars. Nobody is building roads. Nobody is taking care of us when we're sick.
Yeah.
We need diversity. And at the end of the day, irrespective of our experience in Reiki, we are all one. We are all the same. We all have the same Reiki hands. Like
Right.
There is no, this Reiki is more powerful, that Reiki is a higher octave. There's like, Reiki is infinite. There's no such thing as infinity plus one. So so it's all the same.
Yeah.
And when we realize that part, it is the great equalizer of us. And then when we also see the role of self and community care, because they are the same, one is the other. Um, Reiki shows up in that too.
Yeah.
It's I don't know, it feels so natural. And as we've chatted offline, I have some things in the works around this, and I'm still trying to, one, get enough space to pursue the administrative side of things, and two, I also want to design it in such a way that is fair and equitable for all the people participating,
Right.
uh, because that matters to me. And we'll see. But there's I think a Reiki project that will emerge from this that reminds us how revolutionary Reiki is and how Reiki supports us through times of uncertainty.
And I tell you, I cannot wait for people to hear this, Nicholas. I really, truly, it makes me, I mean, like I'm sitting here literally with tears in my eyes, just knowing how incredible you are. But again, very thankful that other people get this exposure and hear this conversation. And that's the beauty. It's such a strange space, I would say, sometimes to be in, where we look out in the world and a lot of people think your only expression of care is absolute like outrage and displaying that in that way. And I think about how much, because we can get bombarded with a lot of what's going on, and I'll actually look for like these kind of times really amplify for me what is my direction of mind, because it doesn't take much to send me into that spiral of just the spiral. But I'm so thankful that there are, people, voices, books, whatever it may be, that I can also direct my mind to bring me back to like my real strength. Like, where is that compassion? Where is that self reflection? How can I hold space for myself and other people, right? And so, but you are definitely one of those voices that is like, oh yeah, come back, come back, but without denying what is going on. And I think that's a big challenge for a lot of people in this community, having almost like a foot in two worlds, it feels like at times, where you don't want to feel like you are denying or sticking your head in the sand. I mean, I don't even know how you could at this point, but also being an expression of what it is that we are practicing. I'm glad to hear what you're hearing because I think it will remind people of the benefit. This isn't a running away. Being
No.
in your practice is not an avoidance. It's how do I stand even more clear and strong and resilient with what is going on. So I have to ask you about this too, Nicholas, because I do know from interviewing you in the past, and you mentioned it, I think, in the last episode as well. You did have a time where you had a very hard time with anxiety, and Reiki and flower essences, these different tools helped you tremendously. In these times, a lot of people are experiencing similar anxiety and these sorts of things and maybe never have before. So could you share a little bit of how, Reiki and your other areas of interest, how they really helped you with that?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking this. The short version of like the backstory that got me to a diagnosis
Yeah.
was, um, I I put a lot of pressure on myself to perform in school, and I was in programs that also foisted this external pressure on me. And then there was also the home environment. And like at no point did all of these forces conspire and say, I think if we're really, really hard on him, he's going to do well.
Right.
That wasn't anyone's goal, right?
Right.
But when we couple that with other things in my life story and just the adolescence, like at large, is a stressful time for human beings.
Yeah.
By the time I went away to school, I had about half a really brilliant semester as a freshman. And then I hit a road bump in like the starting to date and starting to figure out the kind of people I wanted to date and how I was going to like tell people about that. And I had a big stumble.
Wow.
And I mean, I went to see a counselor and I was using pharmaceuticals and I had other like I did the conventional stuff and
Yeah.
you know it was something. But it was the spiritual practice that made the lasting effect in my life. So I had flower essences in my life already, and a little bit of rescue remedy goes a long way towards the frazzled effect of the moment. I travel with a little tin of the pastilles of them, and when I can get away with it, I also have the teeny tiny size dropper bottle. It's like a quarter of an ounce. That way, it'll never get confiscated by TSA. And those are almost always in my bag. I will often travel with like a personalized blend. So there are a lot of different flower essences. They're like little tuning forks for the emotional body. They don't fix the problem, but it's like when you want to correct the pitch of an instrument that's out of
Yeah.
tune, you need to demonstrate what the correct pitch is so you can make the manual adjustment. And the clearer and more frequently we hear the correct pitch, the easier it is to come into alignment with it. So that's kind of how flower essences work in that way. Crystals, similar idea. They catalyze the spiritual work we're doing. They don't do it for us, but they also provide this very real and tangible tool. Like when I wear my old friend rhodonite, like we talked about, I understand the symbolism of rhodonite. Doesn't matter which piece I've got. There's a lot. I recently did a thing on rhodonite, so it's everywhere in my life. But it becomes this touchstone, literally, of what it is that I'm aiming to accomplish, which helps me become more present and more mindful. And then Reiki was another really big piece of the puzzle, probably the biggest, because I didn't need that strange little brown dropper bottle full of mysterious liquid. I didn't need the expensive or inexpensive rock. All I needed was myself.
Mhm.
And that is magical. Like not having to outsource the miracle is a really powerful thing. And it teaches us something about self belief, self determination. It teaches us something about agency. Like I could continuously choose to be anxious. And I'm not saying that I ever chose anxiety. I'm not going to be
Yeah.
one of these people who uses like the dark side of the law of attraction to tell you that you manifest all these problems in your life. Like maybe you did, but also like sometimes the world just sucks. It's okay. Like
Right.
that can happen too.
Yeah.
And like we chatted before, to hyper spiritualize that, to overinterpret that outsources your agency. But the beautiful thing about these hands, everybody's hands, because we all have this potential. Reiki is in all things. Um, when we engage the practice, this is it. The anxiety doesn't disappear. The problems in the world don't disappear. The things that triggered that like avalanche of thoughts don't disappear, but I can make a little bit more space for them. I can put a little bit of space between myself and the situation. And when we can do that, we move from the subject of the situation to the objective person watching it. And when we are not quite in the thick of things, it's just easier to handle. So we can't anticipate that Reiki is going to make an anxiety disorder disappear, because I'll tell you, there are some really stupid things in my life that trigger my anxiety, things that I know to be not factual. For
Yeah.
example, when it takes my husband a long time to text me back
Right.
because he's at work. I know he's at work. I know nothing has happened to him. I know that like his place of work was not hit by an asteroid. It would be in the news. But I can't help but wonder. And if I just put the phone down, spend 2 to 5 minutes, literally that short of a span of time, focused on my breathing, focused on hands-on healing, maybe doing Joshin Kokyuho, reciting the precepts because I love them. If I can do that at the beginning of the spiral, it's a very short and shallow spiral. Like that corkscrew wouldn't get us very far at all. Now, if I wait until that bumps into something else and picks up momentum and picks up something else, then oh, it's a different story. And I gotta maybe work a little bit harder. But when we see headline after headline after headline after headline, when like also the things in your personal life and the lives of the people around you are happening, it's not just what we see myopically. It's everything compounding.
Yeah.
Um, Make space. Be kind to yourself. Stop the doom scrolling. I'm talking to myself here because I got um and maybe compromise. Maybe go, you know what? I'm going to give myself Reiki while I doom scroll. If that's the best you can do, like if you're just wired for that dopamine reward and you can't stop scrolling at this point in your life,
Yeah.
one hand on the place that feels nicest to you. And then like maybe you'll be a little less invested in the doom scrolling. Maybe it'll be much less satisfying than the warmth and the tingles in your hand.
Yeah.
And you'll put the phone down and just come to Reiki.
Yes. Come to Reiki. It's so good. So much of what you said. I'm like, I'm again so thankful that we're having this conversation. One, just that even that reminder, it takes time. And this is why we have to practice our practice. And we're going to have those moments of spin out and frustration and confusion and anger, whatever it may be. But we do have these tools that help us to not just acknowledge ourselves, hopefully with some compassion, but to also bring in some calmness and make it not feel as chaotic as it may have felt in the past. It's incredible hearing your story, and you'll hear it, but when you hear this playback, when you said all I needed was myself, there was just such a sincerity in your voice when you said that. It was so beautiful. And I love that you gave us permission or told us to give ourselves permission to fail. I think that was really powerful too. So, with this, because we have one more hour together, I want to share with everyone an upcoming Reiki class that you have. But can you talk about what the benefit has been for you taking multiple classes or continuing your study, even though you've been practicing for like since 2006 or earlier than that? Yeah.
Um, So it's not a secret that I'm a big old nerd and I just love to learn. There is that. That in and of itself is my motivation. I'm not one of these attunement junkies who needs to get zapped by some powerful force every week. I mean, that's
Yeah.
nice, but I will tell you the more I practice Reiki, the more I receive Reiki, the more I share Reiki, the more I teach Reiki, the less bells and whistles there are in Reiju. Like
Yeah.
it's not like what it was in my first experience, and that's probably a really good sign.
Yeah.
So, so that's kind of a separate conversation. But the other thing is, and we're probably a lot alike in this. My first training didn't answer all my
Yeah.
questions, and at the same time, I had so much love and respect for my first teacher. And you know what she did? She continued to train. She continued to learn. She continued to study with different teachers. And if I could go on a different like timeline branch where after Reiki 1 and Reiki 2 she didn't study with anyone else, my Reiki master training would have looked so different if
Yeah.
she'd never gone to Japan to study with or to experience Mount Kurama or to learn from Hyakuchen Sensei in Kyoto, or she brought Hiroshi Doi over to her center. And as a poor college student, I just couldn't afford it. I have very few Reiki regrets. That's the number one. Just
Oh,
not getting to do that while he was still traveling. So what I love about learning from different folks is it's an opportunity for me to check my biases at the door. I have made a concerted effort over the last few years in particular to seek out teachers who do not practice the way I practice. It's not just because I think, one practice is better or worse or more historical or less historical than another. Um, a big part of what I stand for in the Reiki community is what I just call interlineage outreach.
Mm.
Uh, when I hold a Reiki space, a free class, and in-person or online Reiki share, when I've keynoted at conferences, and any of these things, the goal is for everyone and their practice to be welcome.
Yeah.
So long as your practice isn't disparaging others, so long as your practice isn't making others feel excluded, I want you there.
Yeah.
And even if you are engaging in those things, I'd love for you to come and see what it's like to not do that. Not that I'm the master of it, but that other people in those spaces are going to be demonstrating the same things. So I've got actually a little bit of updating I got to do on that because I took two different trainings that look very different to what I normally do last year, and I'm hoping this year to get at least one other kind of different thing in. And sometimes this means it's not just a formal Reiki class. You know, some lineages they don't let you say, "Oh, well, I'm already a Reiki master, so I'm just going to do level 3." Sometimes they make you start at the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's humbling and meaningful.
Yes.
And then there are other trainings where it's more like vocational skills, um, animal Reiki training, the medical Reiki master training with our dearly departed friend Raven. Um, and trauma informed Reiki with another person that you introduced me to, Michaela Daystar. I enjoy having more than one way to think about the practice. And like, here's the thing: nobody has all the answers. The the like most effective and experienced scholars on Reiki do not have all the answers themselves, and the best of them will remind you of that.
Yeah.
And when we meet the teacher who has all the answers, or so they say, that's a good invitation to just examine who benefits from those claims.
Right.
And that's where this kind of skepticism comes in. So I am doing some work to dismantle some of my own beliefs and about how things work. Um, and the other part of that is kind of like we talked about choosing one aspect of crystals to focus on, or this aspect. It keeps me engaged to go down the rabbit hole in one thing.
Yeah.
Learning Reiki from different teachers keeps me engaged. It keeps me flexible on what I think the practice is and looks like. I strive to do that. And plus, sometimes we just do a thing because it's the way we learned it, not because it's the best thing.
Right.
I admit there are things that are almost second nature to me in my Reiki practice, just because I learned it first that way.
Yeah.
It's not because it's the best or the worst or the right one or the wrong one. It's just the way I learned it. So a really big shock I had when I started to interface with the Reiki community outside of my teacher's weekly Reiki circle and monthly Reiki share for her practitioners was that other practices didn't look like ours.
Mhm.
And not just like, oh, I'd read Yamaguchi's book. I knew that Jikiden Reiki looked a little different, or I knew that Hiroshi Doi did his thing. But like other people who just call themselves Usui Shiki Ryoho or Usui Reiki Ryoho, they don't even all look the same. So Reiki is a diverse system. It's like all of the flavors of ice cream in the grocery store. If you want Rocky Road or Neapolitan or matcha, go for it. I'm not
Yes.
here to judge you and say, no, vanilla is the most traditional, so it's the one you should be doing.
Yeah.
Really not. Like, I'll be transparent when someone asks me a question about something related to their practice, and I don't have an experiential answer because I don't practice that way. I'll say, hey, I've never learned to do it that way.
Right.
I can tell you about the way I learned it instead, or I can tell you about the historical anecdote about how that evolved, but I can't really give you advice on how to do it that way since I've never done it that way. And I do have a lot of I don't knows or I've never done that when people ask me questions about Reiki in particular. And I hope we see a lot more of that. But at the end of the day, no matter what degree we are initiated to, I'm going to paraphrase from the late Phyllis Furumoto, granddaughter of Hawayo Takata. we are all Reiki 1 practitioners.
Mm.
We are all students of the first degree.
Yes.
And then when we initiate a level farther, we are all still students of the first degree and the second degree. And then 1 degree farther, we are still students of the first degree. We are still students of the second degree. And now we are still students of the third degree. And one of those, like, maybe my answer wasn't the kind response, but it was an honest response. When I was a very new and nascent uh, Reiki teacher, I was at an event, a small, like, little kind of crystal shop in the west coast of Florida, and it was my first time in this community in a communal setting versus just coming to teach a one-off class. And one of the other, like, speakers that day brought up Reiki in conversation, and I was so excited because I'd just come back from Japan. Like, I just two Reiki master initiations, one in Japan, one in Florida, and I was like, oh my goodness, are you a Reiki practitioner too? And this man who was many years my senior, I mean, I was young. He stands up as straight as he could be, and he literally looked down at me and he goes, "No, I'm a Reiki master."
Oh.
And I had no filter. I didn't miss a beat. And I just said, "Oh, well, I'm so sorry you don't practice anymore then." And we both got wide-eyed and looked at each other, and I'm like, and he goes, "Oh, no, no, that's not what I meant. Of course, yeah, I'm a Reiki practitioner. And then, I also teach Reiki." I'm like, "That's wonderful. Me too, on both accounts." But it was just this idea that, like, when you get to the third degree, you know it all.
Right.
I actually think an effective Reiki teacher is the one who openly admits they don't know it all.
Yes.
Pamela Miles, I think one time I heard her talk about this phenomenon where someone, like, asked her, like, a client asked her, "Well, you're a Reiki master, so you must do so much more in a session than Reiki 1, right?" And she thought about it and she said, "Actually, I think I do less. The beauty of it is doing less. It's more surrender." And those things, I hope, keep me humble. I'm a human being,
Yes.
and sometimes I get really proud of my work, so it's a work in progress. But really, I learn for all of those many reasons, but also because we're still students of the first degree. We're
I've
students
never
first.
heard that, but that is incredible. I never heard, but that's one of the things I think of. Like, of course, in the Jikiden lineage, you're going to do Shoden Okiden again and again before you move on. But one of the things I realized in that is I'm so thankful I trained with multiple people and all of that. But I'm glad I did level 1 and 2 multiple times, and 3 for that matter, multiple times, because every time back around, you do learn something new. And even I was telling Franz in the conversation we had, it's interesting. I used to go see him every year when he would come to LA, and I could even recognize in my teacher, right, his growth. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible. This is so different than it was last year. And I think that's a good reminder for all of us too, because I think sometimes people get stuck in that imposter syndrome or like suffering in silence because they think they're supposed to be a master of something and yet they're still experiencing their humanness. So that's a great message. Look at you. I'm telling you, we're in class today. So I want to let everyone know you do have a couple of things. So you have a Reiki share that you do monthly. There's one upcoming on March 9th. And of course, we can get information and register for that through the website.
Yes, absolutely. And I do a new one every month. And if I may, I have a different theme this year. So oftentimes, the unique little my Reiki shares are like mini classes with practice time. I can never not use the opportunity to teach. Maybe I just like the sound of my own voice. I'm not really sure. But this year, these Reiki shares are, I'm like disclosing what the themes are ahead of time. And until we either run out of things to talk about or the format is no longer Gasho meditation, the mudra of Gasho as a ritual in Reiki. This month it'll be the Gokai, reciting the precepts, reflecting on the precepts, and how that itself is a ritual in Reiki. And all of this is related, again, not very secretly, although I haven't quite publicly said it. I guess the cat's out of the bag, because I've hinted so many times that now other people are hinting to other people that I'm actually working on a book on the ritual elements of the system of Reiki. So
Wow.
these Reiki shares are kind of like proof of concept. Like, if I can get these things across in that little format, then maybe I can also write about them. So it's kind of an accountability tool.
Wow. Listen, everyone tuning, we've gotten a couple little behind the scenes with upcoming projects and books. Well, on top of that, people can also do Reiki training with you, and you have that coming up this month as well. So on March 21st to 23rd.
Yeah, this is at one of my favorite places to go. This is Circles of Wisdom in Methuen, Massachusetts.
This one's in Massachusetts.
It is, yes. And I'll be back in September to do third degree with them. It's a 3-day training. You can take the whole weekend. You can take half the weekend. Any of my former students, you're eligible for a discount. I'm happy to do that for you as well. But I try to make it up there at least once a year for first and second degree, and at least once a year for third degree. And I'm going to try to make more of those things accessible at other times of year. So it's the year of Reiki for me.
Okay, first of all, I'm asking you, please, because the dates that you're doing this, I also have a retreat happening in San Diego. Please let me know all the information for September so that I can really come. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Please. Yes, please let me know. Um, that would be incredible. That would be incredible. So, if you want to take Reiki classes, also the crystal healing workshop, you have a lot going on this month. You have a lot going on just always. Go to theluminous.pearl.com, and also on Instagram, follow Nicholas at the Luminous Pearl. As we mentioned, he has beautiful posts. You're always teaching. That's an understatement. But just in front of me, again, here's the book that may be updated, which of course I have to get the updates as well, but still, Foundations of Reiki Rojo. That is the Reiki book. The new crystal book is Crystals for Psychic Self-Defense. This is incredible. I feel like I don't even have to say that. Just like you said, I know a lot of people in this community. They know you. You've been here. This is the fifth time around. And anyone who has read your work knows what an incredible teacher you are. So thank you for giving us some more. And I get one more hour to pick your brain. So be sure to come back on Friday for the conversation with Nicholas Pearson, author, teacher extraordinaire. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, beautiful alchemist. That is the end of episode number 2 with Nicholas Pearson, all about Reiki history and research and his path with Reiki. Don't forget, he has an upcoming class on March 1st, all about crystals for psychic self-defense. The link to register for the class online is down in the show description. You can also learn more about Nicholas and his work at theluminous.pearl.com, or follow him on Instagram at the Luminous Pearl. And through his website and even in the show description, you can get the link to order his new book. So I just want to thank Nicholas again for taking all of this time to share with us here on Reiki Radio. We have one more episode with Nicholas, so be sure to tune in on Friday. I will see you next time, and remember to always journey in love.